That's the lowest note I can hit. That's my tongue coming off of it and then barely going up against it with low air.
I just tell people before you start trying to sound like an elk, you're going to sound like that European ambulance. Go high to low and just run through that, and then you slowly start speeding that up.
If you have someone like me who has a high arch and a high palate, I could stretch that latex way up there and overstretch it, and then you don't get the consistency in the calls. So many people hear what an elk sounds like, they put a diaphragm in, and they instantly try to sound like an elk. And I found that that's really a bad way to go about it, because you're missing out on the mechanics of how to make those sounds.
It's something that cannot and has not been, it can't be outsourced really. It needs to be a handmade product. There's no machine that can do 20 or 30 of them at a time. They're all built one at a time.
It's muscle memory. I mean, your tongue is a muscle, and you're calling with your tongue. You've got to practice it. You've got to get your tongue in shape and find that muscle memory.
This is Jason Phelps of Phelps Game Calls.
And I'm Corey Jacobsen with Elk 101, and you're listening to Living Country in the City.
Y'all ready for your dose of flyover state spirit? Straight from the concrete jungle? Well, put down your latte and pull on your boots. It's time for Living Country in the City.
All right, y'all, welcome to episode 64 of Living Country in the City. Before we get started, a big shout out to Sawyer Products for supporting the podcast. You know, if y'all are looking for those simple products, stuff like bug spray, water filtration, or first aid, you know, the stuff that really keeps you in the outdoors for longer, make sure y'all check out Sawyer. They're a household name. They've been doing this for over 30 years, and their products are fantastic. So make sure you check them out at Sawyer.com. Also, a big thank you to all y'all that have been supporting me through my Patreon every month. You know, y'all are really the heartbeat of this podcast. You know, you make it possible to continue doing what I'm doing, really sharing this content that I love with y'all. So big thank you. You know, if you want to join the Living Country in the City team, really become part of what I'm doing here and help support the podcast, make sure y'all check out my support page at livingcountryinthecity.com/support. There's a lot of ways to support that don't necessarily involve a financial commitment. Y'all can subscribe to the podcast or my YouTube channel. Make sure y'all are sharing with your friends, leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes or Stitcher, or buying merch from the store. There's lots of different ways, but, you know, if y'all hop on my Patreon page, there's a lot of cool rewards that you can get for even just $1 a month. You know, that's less than a couple of coffees out here in LA. So make sure y'all check it out, livingcountryinthecity.com/support. Now, I am super excited to release this episode. You know, this was one I've been really wanting to do. I recorded this out at the Western Hunt Expo in Salt Lake City. And, you know, we're 6 months out from elk season, and I am struggling with my elk calling, and I need as much practice and as much help as I can get. So I went to two of the absolute best elk callers I know, Corey Jacobsen and Jason Phelps. Sat down with the both of them, stole the Gritty Bowman couch for a morning. Thank you very much, Brian. And I really went through the very basics of elk calling from start to finish. I also am going to be putting up a video on my YouTube channel of this podcast, so make sure y'all give that one a look too. So let's get to it. Enjoy it, y'all. Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Living Country in the City. We're still here in Salt Lake City at the Western Hunt Expo. This is not the Sportsman's Expo. That's what I thought it was last year when I bought my tickets and didn't show up here. So, but it worked out well. So we're hanging out here, stealing Brian's couch for a minute. Don't hate me, Brian. But yes, I'm sitting here with two gentlemen who, in my opinion, are embodying what the hunting industry should really be about. Mr. Corey Jacobsen and Jason Phelps, thank you guys so much for hopping on the podcast today.
So was that on purpose that you said Mr. Corey Jacobsen and just Jason Phelps? Or I mean, you did say gentleman.
I think that was a status, though. Like Mr. and then
was that on purpose?
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one.
I just had to get that in now.
Oh, thanks. Good. I'm sure it's the first of many.
Well, like I said, I'm here with Mr. Jason Phelps and Corey Jacobsen.
Had a way better ring to it.
I'm just gonna have to alternate this, or else I'm gonna end up in trouble and get thrown out of here. But yeah, I just wanted to say it's there's a lot of drama that goes on in the hunting industry, and here comes.
Speaking of drama, we're gonna get kicked off Brian's couch now.
Okay, it's their fault. It's their fault. I blame them. It was their suggestion. Here.
Come on in.
Group hug.
Look at this. Peace among. But yeah, absolutely not. But after that interlude, I just want to say, there's a lot of drama that happens in the hunting industry. We all know, we all see it, and Corey, I've known you for about a year now, and I came up, we were talking, and it's just funny because in all reality, you guys are competitors to some extent, and you came up and I don't know why. I don't know why at all.
No. We'll find out in a month.
Exactly. And first thing you did when I ran into you over by the Phelps booth, you're like, "Hey, have you met Jason Phelps? You got to come meet this guy." And it's one of those funny things where it really embodies, I think, what's super genuine about this industry, and what I love to see, and what really drew me to it is, it's not a competition. You're both about furthering, whether you want to call it the sport of hunting or the hobby or the pastime or whatever it is, but that's what you're both about, and that's what you embody so much. And I see that. I know a lot of other people see that, and I really, really appreciate it.
No, I just think it's, we're elk hunters, we're people, we're individuals, and I don't think we should be categorized by the color of a diaphragm elk call we use, or the camouflage we wear, or the backpacks we use. It's at the end of the day, we're elk hunters, and we have to be united. And if we're divided over one thing, if I'm only willing to hang out with somebody that uses my same elk calls and my boots and the camo I wear and the backpacks I wear and the bow I shoot and all that, pretty soon I've only got 4 or 5 friends standing around me, and we're pretty isolated.
Yeah,
so.
And that's, I like to use the analogy, like, you might drive a Ford pickup truck, I might drive a Dodge, but that doesn't seem to matter. Why, when we get down into the hunting industry, does a pack now all of a sudden matter? We got friends that use, like Gatorade, you like Powerade. That doesn't seem to bother, but so all of a sudden you get inside this industry and brands all of a sudden start to separate, and I don't think it should be that way.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think we were talking a little bit earlier, and it's, when you end up in those, whatever you want to call them, brand wars, it's not the brands themselves that suffer. It's not the companies. It's the consumers that use them that have no idea what's going on, but suddenly somebody's sending them a nasty message on Instagram because
just
they're
the
wearing a hat
analogy of boats on the lake, and as the water goes up, if all the boats are on the same lake, they're all rising together. And if we're too worried about trying to throw rocks at the other boat to sink it, we're missing out on what's going on in the rising around it. And I just, there's too much good stuff going on to focus on bad. And I mean, at the end of the day, Jason makes elk calls, and he's got to sell elk calls, and that's his livelihood. I don't make elk calls. I do have a line of elk calls, so I want to sell them, but it's not my livelihood. And my livelihood is teaching people how to hunt elk. And I've got sponsors and everything that I am very loyal to, but at the end of the day, I want to teach somebody how to hunt elk and be successful regardless of what gear they're using. And
so, speaking of that brings us to the topic of the day, which is how terrible my elk calling is. I mean, I picked up, I've used the little diaphragm calls before. They used to sell them on Venice Beach, but they were these teeny little ones, and they were literally solely...
They sold diaphragm elk calls on Venice Beach?
Not elk calls specifically, but they were these teeny little diaphragm calls, basically, but they were solely for the purpose of just making annoying noises. And so I remember I saw I picked up my first
idea. More noisemakers.
Pretty much. That's pretty much how I learned initially how to make noise out of one of them, because I'd seen them and I'm like, oh, I recognize those things. This one's just significantly larger. And so I kind of had an idea of how to get sound out of it once I remembered which direction to put it in. And
slightly important, by the way.
You got 4 tries, right?
Yeah. True. 2. If you inhale, you can go. You got 2.
Who's I talking with? Oh my gosh, Al Morris. I was talking with him actually last year at the ISE show, and he was saying, the first time I ever picked up an elk call, I inhaled and I just about killed myself.
Yeah.
But so I picked one up and kind of figured out how to make some noise. Started watching some YouTube videos. Ended up at the ISE show last March, and no idea who your dad was, Corey. And I I just ended up there, and I was like, oh, sweet, more elk calls. I need to buy things. And all of a sudden, this like really nice guy was sitting there kind of helping me out and, sitting down and showing me how to actually breathe from my diaphragm and all this stuff. And I think it wasn't until well after the expo that I'm like, oh wow, I got a lesson from a really smart guy. So that was super exciting for me. But really, most of everything I've learned has been from YouTube videos and sitting down. So suffice to say, my education in elk calling is lacking. So I figured I gotta get two of the foremost gentlemen in the.
There's that word again.
Yeah,
gentlemen.
I think we'll just let him run with it.
Yeah. It sounds kind of cool. I've never been called that before, but.
Well, I gotta take it up here because by the time we're done talking, it's gonna use guys. Jeez. But yeah, so I mean, once again, I figure it's useful to start from the basics for anyone that's listening.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we talked about which way do you put the elk call in.
Yep.
So I mean, we start out. You got this piece of tape.
Which diaphragm is
latex.
Is that the Elk 101 contender you grabbed first?
I believe this might be the Elk 101 contender, but we do have a couple here. So what do we got here? We've got a couple of Phelps amp calls too.
Yep.
With all these fancy names.
We went we really dug deep on those ones and went with color. Well, I mean, you've probably seen it. Hey, I use that one blue call, and
nobody
I'm like,
calls them by the name.
And so you end up with this name, and then you end up everybody referencing color. I'm like, I'm gonna outthink this one. I'm gonna just go right back to color.
So can I really quick just make a universal request from probably 90% of the call using population? Can we stop using this neon green tape?
It's
because it is the most disgusting tasting. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the All-Star. It's one of the ones I use probably more than anything else, but it tastes foul, and that taste never goes away.
Really?
It never goes away.
So just a little quick backstory. Our green is now a forest green. We had the same exact green tape, and that from all my research, I don't want to go on a tangent here, that fluorescent green dye has that bitter taste to it. And I was all worried, like, I don't want to get sued. I don't want somebody to own my house. So, like, sent my tape company, sent me the MSDS, like, and then the call started getting bad reviews. At least mine, I think mine had a more bitter taste than yours.
Yeah, and I think it's in the adhesive more than the dye.
Yeah, and so I got concerned that the green call was getting bad reviews. So I'm like, we got to switch
for taste.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I don't want that call to get a bad rap. And
see, and I just market mine as a Sour Patch call, and
there you go.
It's green apple. And
there you go.
That's what you need to do. You guys got to get Mountain Ops to start like infusing the calls with Ignite or something.
I think Night and Hell back just a few years ago had like a double-decker like snooze can looking apparatus that had like mint leaves, or they had a couple different flavors in their turkey calls.
Interesting.
So it's been done. It's been anything to market. Yeah.
I will say some days I do pop in a call that I haven't used in a couple days. I'm like, yep, well that tastes like Enduro, or that. I'm like, what was I drinking before I used that call?
Yeah.
Oh, that one tastes like Old Miller Lite. But so we got these elk calls, and I don't know if we want to break down the different parts of them really quick here, and I guess maybe even talk about the what they're made of first and foremost.
For sure.
If you gentlemen want to go through that.
Jason, your manufacturer,
Yeah, I mean, so we can all calls start with an aluminum frame. We eventually sandwich them in half, so they start out as an oval. We turn them into a half oval basically as we build them. So as you put them on the press, you start with them bent over with kind of like a Pac-Man. We slide our latex in there. They're all built on presses. They're built to a specific spec. We both stretch them sideways and front to back. We get all those stretches dialed in. We'll cut that latex off. We then put a square piece of tape, a rectangular piece of tape over it. Now, I don't know the exact construction on the container. I believe that dome needs to be glued on. The plastic domes need to be glued on. My aluminum dome is stamped right into the construction of the frame because I'm really lazy and I wanted to exclude another step. It made my life easier. So our plate is stamped into the frame, and then we tape them, and then we have a die cutter that also, so the latex is stretched on an arbor press with basically a customized plate, and then the tape cutter is also on an arbor press that cuts the shape. We all have different. We all have a different preference in shape of the tape, so you can see mine's a little shorter where the container's tape looks to be a little deeper. But we tape all those, and then everything, to my knowledge, I don't know about all, but I'd say 95% of everybody, they're all handmade still in the States. It's something that cannot and has not been, it can't be outsourced really. It needs to be a handmade product. There's no machine that can do 20 or 30 of them at a time. They're all built one at a time.
Yep. Well, and you're talking about kind of the differences in between them, and I think that brings up a good point is not every call is going to work for every person.
Exactly.
I mean, you look at how many different diaphragm calls do you have?
Between the flats and our amp frame, we probably have 25 different. Yeah. It gets to be a manufacturing nightmare. But there truly could be a call specifically for everybody that's a little bit different.
And I think we're 25, 28 diaphragms. You've got how many different manufacturers out there? 15.
Yeah.
They all have a line of it. So I mean, you look at these options, and there's 100 different options for a diaphragm elk call for somebody, and realistically, just about every one of them are slightly different in some way, whether it's latex thickness, latex stretch, size of the frame, the width of the frame, all these different things that ultimately contribute to the sound that comes out of it, and is personal preference based on the user.
Yeah, so I mean, you take two, I feel bad when I say it's two good callers, and you look at Corey's All-Star, it's got a higher rise plastic dome on it, quite a bit higher. So a guy like me, I've never personally liked a high plastic dome where you can't argue the use of it when he uses it, but then a guy like me likes that lower profile, either the pallet plate from Primo's or Rocky Mountain Calls or our amp frame. I like that lower profile dome, just seems to work and fit better for me. So just between guys that sound amazing, good elk callers, you can see the differences in their preference as well.
Yeah. And so that brings up, you got to pick a friend, you got to try a bunch because when you're trying to find a personal fit for yourself, really that's the only solution. You can't just look at one and be like, oh no, that's the one that's gonna fit for my mouth. There's no it's not like shoe sizes where you're like, oh, I'm an 11.5 wide. I wouldn't be impressed if somebody was able to categorize the calls in that manner. Oh yeah, I'm a 12.5 dome with a 2 width or something, And
it is important to try several different calls from different manufacturers to find the one that fits you. And there's several hunters I know that use multiple calls from multiple manufacturers on the same day because one of them they cow call better with, one of them they bugle better with.
Yeah, we highly recommend, by all means buy a couple of ours, but also, if I can hear a guy, blow right through a call, like maybe you should try a Barry's call, like his X-Reed. The thing just, you
can hammer on it.
Tons of pressure on it. Maybe if you have a real high arch, maybe you should go try one of, Corey's plastic dome calls that'll fit up in your arch better. And so I want people to trust me in my recommendations versus if I just get in the amp and stay there. Then I lose trust. I lose, and so there's a lot of great calls out there that fit different mouth styles.
And the hard part is, we talked at the beginning, if you're brand specific and you're only, closed-minded to your brand, if somebody can't use it, they're divided from you now. They don't even want anything to do with you. Yeah. But if, like Jason said, if you're trying to truly help somebody be a better elk caller and you're open to, hey, this might not be the best for you. I have 2 elk calls with my name on it, the All-Star and the Contender, and I am fully aware that not everybody's going to be able to use them. These are just ones that I built that I feel I use really well, that I think are easy to learn on, and I know, 50% of the people out there probably can't even make a sound with it maybe, so.
Well, I remember when you first released the Contender to the Elk 101 members, I remember, everyone, the hype. I was super stoked to get it. I got in, I pop it in, and I could not make a single noise on it. It was, I don't know what it was, but probably my first 10 times trying it, I could barely get it to squeak out. And because I'd been using the All-Star, I'd gone through a few of them, and it's just one of those weird things that I'm like, well, I guess it doesn't work for me. And then I started getting used to it and figuring out, okay, the pressure and all of this stuff. And once again, I'm far, far, far from an expert at figuring out what I'm doing wrong. But then it also ended up being one of the ones I took with me on my elk hunt, because once I figured it out, I could consistently get a really strong call out of it. Yeah. But there was a bit of a learning curve with it.
And that's just it. And for me, like, we have the World Championship elk calling contest coming up in a month, and I'm starting to practice, and I'll use an All-Star, a Mistress, a Contender, just trying to find the one that hits just right. And I'll find, say an All-Star, and it's just cow calling perfect. I'm like, okay, that one I mark it as my cow call, and I pick up a Contender and try to cow call with it, and I can't make good cow calls. But after a couple of minutes, it's different latex thickness, different stretch. My tongue muscles have to react differently. I get going with that, and I pick up the Ulster I just had making sweet cow sounds with. I'm like, I can't cow call with it because I'm blowing right through. I'm putting too much pressure on it. So from one to the next, it does take adjustment to operate them.
And I feel like that also brings up another topic when you're selecting a call is, do you want to use, are you looking for a call that does everything fairly well? Are you looking to take a couple calls with you and do specific things with it? Because there's a lot of different sounds you want to learn to make.
So in my opinion, Corey touched on competition calling. That's completely different from elk hunting. So in the elk hunting world, we got a lot. If we screw up, if we're not perfect on that tone, it's different. So, but I think in the elk woods, and that's been the evolution of my company, is we started with the flats, which it was either it was never the jack of all trades. It was the king of cow calls. I couldn't build a good universal call. We're now, that we've developed the amp, some of their calls, I think we're all looking for a universal call that we can do everything pretty confidently on. It may not be the best, like you said, for a comp where you're holding that perfect high note, hitting that perfect cow call, but in the hunting woods, we are looking for that call that does everything good on one diaphragm. But we still switch. Like if my big giant locating reed isn't working, there might be the next time I might go to a little a younger bull or just a squeakier reed. I might blow it just as loud, just trying to change stuff up. But yeah, in my opinion, I'm looking for one call that does everything on a hunt.
Totally. And when you get into we talked about what makes up a call, and we'll get into calling and the technique for it. But a cow call is made with really soft air pressure. It's completely tongue control. Making that change in the octaves and getting that just soft, sweet, nasally sound. And when you go to bugle, you have to put more air pressure and a lot more tongue pressure into it. And instead of starting at the high note and dropping off like you do on a cow call, you start low and go up the octave and then drop off. And so finding a latex that will handle the drop off with low air pressure as well as the scale up with high tongue and high air pressure, it's pretty, you've got to find just the right thickness, just the right stretch on just the right frame width to be able to do that. And so finding that one that's perfect at everything is really,
and then so going on what he just said, finding perfect, it's only finding one that's perfect, but it's perfect for you.
For
one person. One that works for you is now not perfect for me, and that's why we end up with 25 calls, in a single brand line.
So now here's the question. Would you say, who knows more about latex? Would it be you guys or maybe a dominatrix? Because who has spent more time testing different types of latex?
It was funny before we walked in here. We were just having a big discussion about, we're both engineers, so it's like we maybe take too much interest in latex and properties and elongation and stretch, and we pay attention to it, I think, at a very high clip on how it affects an elk call, and some of the properties that definitely affect it.
And we were talking, the colored latex versus the natural, just the whole process of building latex affects the final product. As far as, like you said, elongation, you think latex is latex. Well, the length of time that it cures, all of that affects elongation, which affects the final sound. If you get, synthetic latex versus natural rubber latex, you look at medical latex and all these different kinds of latex that are out there, they react very differently when it comes to a diaphragm elk call.
Yeah, just like a recipe. You can make the perfect loaf of bread one time, and then even from like order to order, I can get a great batch of latex and then just a horrible batch of latex next. And so, just like building that recipe, they can screw up in the process of building the liquid form before they cast it out. They can get screwed up in that process as well.
And thickness, you think about, we're talking 3 mil thickness latex, and most of the time it has a plus or minus 1 mil tolerance. So you get a 2 mil versus a 4 mil, they're completely different calls. Yeah. And so making sure tolerances are within spec. And
I think that's once again, when you're selecting these, you may end up, you try and keep as much quality control as possible, but sometimes on a call, one will be stretched a little bit more. The latex will have maybe a slight imperfection in that one specific call, and so you can occasionally pick up the same call. I've had pretty good with all the calls I picked up. I've had pretty consistent across the board, and that's, like you're saying, that's what the benefits of them being handmade. A lot of attention being paid to all of these calls. But it's all about experimentation and figuring out what works for you. But so speaking of that, we got a few calls in front of us. Got to figure out how to put one of these in. So we got the tape, we got the dome, we got the latex all around the frame. Which way does this sucker go in here?
So it goes in dome up. So the dome goes up against the roof of your mouth, that becomes the roof of your mouth.
Okay.
And that's the benefit of the calls that have the backing, either a dome or a plate on it, is before or without that, the flat latex can stretch all the way up to the roof of your mouth. So if you have someone like me who has a high arch and a high palate, I could stretch that latex way up there and overstretch it, and then you don't get the consistency in the call. So this, with the dome on it, it really helps with the consistency, so you don't overstretch, so you get to the same point. It helps with the octave changes and all that. So the dome, if there's a metal tab like on the amp, that goes up against the roof of your mouth, and that leaves the latex exposed to your tongue, so your tongue settles up against the latex. And I always tell people it's like a blade of grass. When you pick up a blade of grass and stretch it and blow air across it, that vibration causes noise. And that's the exact same principle here. You're wanting to get air to channel across that latex and vibrate the latex to make a noise.
All right, I'm going to take a quick moment really quick so we can hear a word from one of my partners. All right, y'all, we all know there's folks out there who are successful year after year rocking a set of bargain bin Walmart camo. However, a full layering system of premium hunting clothes can make a huge impact on your comfort level when you're spending time deep in the backcountry, and can really be the difference between going longer and harder or just going home. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I personally can't afford to drop $3,000 or even more on a full set of premium hunting gear. Now, that's why I'm excited to tell y'all about Scree Gear. Not only is Scree as capable and durable as any of the other premium lines out there, it also comes in at a price point that won't leave you too broke to put in for tags. Scree's patterns use the science behind perception and fractal concealment and have been designed by one of the foremost concealment experts out there. He's designed for militaries, law enforcement, and special forces in the U.S. and around the world. Not only are their patterns incredibly versatile for any sort of terrain, but their layering systems allow you to pack a minimal amount of gear for maximum effect. So whether you're side-hilling across rocky debris in the baking desert sun or crawling over snow-covered deadfall high up in the frozen Rockies, Scree's versatile layering system has you covered. Literally. And if that's not enough, for that added layer of confidence, Scree offers an outfitter and military discount, a limited lifetime warranty on all their gear, and free returns on new gear until you find the perfect fit. Even better, you can get 10% off all orders from the Scree store by using code COUNTRY10. Check out that Scree discount along with discounts from other awesome outdoor companies by visiting my partners page at livingcountryinthecity.com/partners.
All right, so goes in, dome up, and then is it going, which way is it pointing?
Just like that, latex towards the front.
So throwing this in. All right, I got it in my mouth.
So the next thing is your tongue placement, and actually call placement. You just put it in your mouth. Some guys like it straight up. I don't know. I'm a guy that runs it almost straight up, maybe a little bit forward. Some guys like to, and when I'm teaching people, I have them run it all the way forward. Some people are just more comfortable there, but you need to kind of figure out what works for you on not so far back that you're gagging on it, not so far forward that you're going to lose it out of your palate, but kind of find that even ground in the middle that's comfortable for you.
Somewhere where it settles and you feel like it makes a good seal up on the roof of your mouth.
That's what I was going to say. The important part is sealing that air, because if you put it in and you blow and all the air goes across the top of it, between the call and the roof of your mouth, you aren't getting air on the latex and you aren't going to be able to make a sound. So sealing, using the tape to seal against the roof of your mouth so all the air can be channeled down between your tongue and the latex, and you create basically just a little air channel between your tongue and the latex.
Okay. So we're getting that in there. Finding a somewhat comfortable place. I shouldn't have
Oh, there you go. Hey, you're good. You can make elk sounds.
There we go.
Are we done?
And cut. So I feel like
there you go. Perfect.
As I'm trying to talk, I'm going to pull this out. So I get that good seal.
Samuel's going through puberty. Voice is squeaking.
Entirely too many times on this podcast have I suddenly broken out into puberty in the middle of a sentence. You get that good seal. It's up in the roof of your mouth. What's that next step? How do you then get that first squeak? As long as you're not trying to talk, and it is just naturally happening.
So I think for me, and Jason can give his experience there, but so many people hear what an elk sounds like. They put a diaphragm in and they instantly try to sound like an elk. They instantly try to bugle. They instantly try to cow call, and I found that that's really a bad way to go about it, because you're missing out on the mechanics of how to make those sounds. So I always teach people, just start out making a soft sound. Just get noise, just like you did. Put it in your mouth and talk until you find out where that resonation happens to make a noise. I tell people to say the word hiss, like a snake, and really hold out that S.
So,
see, and that S puts your tongue in the exact position where you're going to contact the latex and make noise. And then once you figure that out, just keep replicating that sound, just that hiss. And then the first thing most people do once they make that sound is they try to blow really hard with a bunch of air to hit the high note, and that's the wrong thing to do. You want to use tongue pressure with low air like you're doing there, and just push your tongue up into it and down and just start making the pitch changes with tongue pressure.
Okay, so we got the hiss. And then so that's all low air. Like I could have held that for a long time, and that was just all pressure, very light pressure on there. You're not jamming your tongue up against that, and it's changing those pitches.
Yeah, and then the harder you jam your tongue against it, if you put it in. That's the lowest note I can hit. That's my tongue coming off of it and then barely going up against it with low air.
Sitting against it flat.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then as I start pushing my tongue up into it,
so that's the old European ambulance, and that's what, once you start getting that change, I just tell people before you start trying to sound like an elk, you're going to sound like that European ambulance. Go high to low and just run through that, and then you slowly start speeding that up, and then you start to sound like you get that break over on the elk call. But that's the first thing I tell people is try to make the sound first, and then you sound like that European ambulance. Just practice going up and coming down on a cow, not really a cow call, but just that,
even a cow call,
soft sound. Just go up and down. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick was tongue placement. You guys talked about getting your tongue there. So one of the things I like to tell people, because they always try to float their tongue, is to kind of pin it against the bottom of your back teeth and then close your jaw, bring your bottom jaw up, and then you'll feel your tongue finally make contact with that reed. And so that kind of gets them started at least, because some people, I get anxiety watching people try to call and not make any noise. So I'm like, all right, put your tongue there and then at least close until you feel your tongue hit that. And then you talked about pressure. One of the ways I tell people to think about it is not just lifting your tongue up, but keeping the tip of your tongue planted behind your bottom teeth.
Yeah.
And kind of imagine pushing your bottom teeth out. You get a little bit of a flex.
Yep.
Or use your hinge instead of some people just want to lift their tongue up,
and you don't
free float it
the
into
tip
the call.
of your tongue.
Yeah.
You'll feel it almost you feel like your tongue kind of expand in your mouth almost with that pressure up and to the side a little bit.
And then
the head of a cobra, it flares out once you push up against it.
Yep. And then another thing, just another little tip is, say that's the bottom of my tongue. A lot of people, I think they get all tense and they try to they push up hard. Everybody I've heard or told, keep relaxed. The flatter you can keep that tongue against latex instead of, putting weird pressure on it, seems
better seal
to help.
Yep.
Better seal, and then lets them start making sounds a little bit earlier.
And so it'll come up. You'll be hitting more with the back of your tongue almost, rather than you're not putting the tip of your tongue up against this
Use
latex.
the tip of your tongue. It's a small little acute muscle there. First off, it's going to tickle like crazy. Second off, it's way easier to control the flat part of your tongue than the tip of your tongue. Mm-hmm. A bigger muscle is much easier to control than a small muscle. So, trying to get more of the ball of your tongue, the roll of your tongue instead of the tip of your tongue is definitely crucial.
Okay. All right, so I'm swapping out for the contender for the Amp Black here, and we're gonna try it again.
And we can dub in some really good sounds over this right off the bat. So.
I'll just go download the Elk Nut app and copy all this. Yet another person throwing in other names here. This is my first time using one of your calls. I am getting there. I am. This altitude has my mouth so dang dry. I'm going to need to take a couple drinks of water in a minute.
Yeah, instead of trying to make it change octave, like you're going from one note and then clearly going to the next one, just let it roll up to the top and down, and it'll naturally pop on its own as it goes to the next note.
There you go.
Yep. That's good. And really what we've accomplished right there is the hardest part of elk
Yeah,
calling. It really is.
Yep.
Just getting to make a sound and be able to control the latex to go to the high note and the low note. From there, it's just a matter of understanding the mechanics of what each sound, what a cow sound is really made up of, and what a bugle's made up of. And once you can control it to make those noises, you can hit the mechanics of each call, and then put it together in the right cadence, and you're calling elk.
And I think that's one thing you mentioned. I think that's one thing that never really clicked for me. Is I was like, okay, you hear these like steps, and I would try and I'm to some extent doing the process correctly, but then I'm trying to like almost jump my tongue so it hits those steps. Where as I was doing it now, I was just focusing on making it a nice slow rise up, and it does. It breaks at those certain points.
It will, and the tube makes a huge difference in that. I mean, when I bugle without a tube, it's just it doesn't sound like it's hitting those individual notes. It's just more of slurring up to the top and slurring back down. The tube really helps transition each of those and hit that stair step as it goes up.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying to let's try now just to experiment with different calls. Now that was the Amp Black. You guys heard the Contender before. This is the Amp Orange, a light cow calf,
that's our lightest latex, lightest stretch in our entire line.
And my big fat fingers cannot.
It makes me nervous selling that one to people because they go try to rip bugles on it. Like it'll handle some, but not a lot. So it should be really light, and you may or may not feel the difference, based on your experience, but.
It's definitely, especially those softer, it's a lot easier to get the
initial sound.
Initial sound, and that's one thing I've actually struggled with, and I'm sure probably a lot of people do, is the consistency when you first start. If you haven't been, it's one thing, I've been bugling for practicing my bugling, practicing my calling for the last hour. And then, okay, I can throw in one, and I can get that clean sound first thing right off. Is it just a matter of experience then after that, or is there like a good trick for people that are kind of starting out when they want to hit that first bugle or that first cow call?
I think it's practice.
He mentioned. Yeah, he mentioned already starting to practice for the Worlds in a month. I've noticed I haven't been calling a lot since I've been in build mode. Just in my 3 days here in the booth, I've gotten more. I've gotten better in those 3 days. Just from the point, just in those 3 days, it is just practice, and
it's muscle memory. I mean, your tongue is a muscle, and you're calling with your tongue. You've got to practice it. You've got to get your tongue in shape and find that muscle memory. And if you practice twice, right now, and then go September and throw the diaphragm in, you aren't going to be able to make good sounds. Your tongue's not going to be in shape and know where to go and how to make those sounds.
So we're working on the cow calls. So we're working on the initial sound. So we're getting those initial sounds down. Then what's the next step as far as making those cow calls? What are the parts of those cow calls that you want to then start focusing on?
And I think that's probably the most critical part, is understanding. We talked about air pressure and tongue pressure, and they're two very independent components to making the sound. That air pressure, as you're coming up, it comes from deep in your diaphragm, and down in the bottom of your lungs. Take that deep breath and then control that air as it comes up. You don't want to just force all that air out all of a sudden and blow it all out, and you've got 2 seconds of a call and you're done. You want to control that air as it's coming up, and then your tongue pressure, you control the pressure against the latex with your tongue. So there's low tongue pressure that gives you the low note with low air pressure. Then as you increase the air pressure and increase the tongue pressure, it's going to give you that high note. So for a cow call starts at a high note and then quickly just drops off. So your tongue pressure, soft air pressure for the high note with high tongue pressure, and then you just drop your tongue off pretty rapidly, and it just gives you that high note to a low note. So all I'm doing there is holding my tongue, starting with my tongue tight against the latex, forcing a little air across it, and then just pulling my tongue away from the latex. So it's that high tongue pressure to low tongue pressure, and that's really the mechanics of a cow call. I like to tell people, once you get that, just practice that, and then use your lips and really exaggerate the letters E, O as you're doing that. So the high note E, and as you drop off, O. and that's a cow call. So, I mean, it's just once you break it down to that simplicity, the mechanics of it and then the cadence of it, and it's really pretty easy to replicate.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's give this a try with the amp orange here. Get out an initial sound.
So that transition from that E to the O, you want it to be really smooth, not a E-O quick one. It's just a smooth transition there. There you go. And then when you really get into it, that high note is just super short. You just hit it and then drop off. If you don't hold that high note too long, you just touch it and then drop off. There you go. Man, we need to quit teaching people that.
Okay. That's probably the best cow calling I've ever
I was
done.
going to say, that's plenty good enough to call an elk right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're working on those cow calls. Are there, as far as making cow calls, are there like different styles of cow calls, and what, I'm sure as far as just a beginner in practicing, that's the main thing you want to focus on, but as you're expanding, what other, I guess, phrases, for lack of a better term?
So, I mean, as you get experience, you'll start to realize, well, if I do this with my tongue or do that, you can start to sound like, an older cow, a younger cow, all on one
And what are the
one
differences
diaphragm.
between the old cow and
So the old cow, you're going to have that deeper sound, that older, mature, deeper sound. The calf calls are going to be short. They don't really have that breakover. So like he had mentioned that high-pitched chirp. On the calf, it's a little bit higher with just a little ending. So you'll start to learn, as you become, start to perfect the art of a diaphragm call, you'll start to learn how to control that high, on the calf, and then the cow, you're going to really maybe drown out that low note, the O part of it. You might over exaggerate for that nasally estrusy sound, and so you'll start to learn all of these different things and how to control it with your tongue.
Maybe give an example between the cow and the calf. So that's got the lower, a little bit deeper nasally sound of a cow.
And then you can just do your real quick calf. So calf, I don't use calf calls a lot, but there's been times where calves are extremely noisy little creatures as part of the elk herd, and they've given off calls and they want to communicate. So there will be times where I'm in a thick patch of timber and I know I'm getting close to elk, where if you can sometimes communicate with the calf. So they're all ultimately in the woods being as versatile as possible. Everybody, you don't need to be the best elk call in the world to kill elk. I agree, but there are certain times and certain circumstances where having all of those tools in your tool bag could be the difference. Maybe not the difference, but at least aid.
It just adds another level of realism and versatility to your calling.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can kill elk with very basic tools, in your calling toolbox, but it's like working on a car. Yeah, if you've got some channel locks, you can get a lot done. But if you've got a ratchet at the right size, life's going to be a whole lot easier.
Yep.
So all right, so let's see if we can. So, calf.
Yep.
And then. A little more like that for.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
Yep.
So what's I'm far from it, but say I'm mastering my cow calls. What do I want to learn next year? As far as to add to the
I think both of our calling styles, we're kind of finally getting to our calling styles now. You pull out. We're going to use the same diaphragms, but then you add, the grunt tube, the bugle tube, whatever you want to call it, to start assisting those bugles. And as Corey said, cow calling for most people is easier. When you get into the bugling, you now not only have your tongue pressure to worry about, but you now have to try to coordinate that with volume of air. So you're now trying to coordinate those two aspects of calling together. So it's kind of the reverse. You start out on the cow, you're starting out high to low. On the bull call, or the bugle, you're going to start with less pressure. You're going to start to increase air and increase pressure together, or however you're your mouth it works, however, whatever combination you need to use to get that sound. But you're going to start to add more volume as you go, and you're going to have to start to coordinate that pressure at the right time on the bugle. But it's basically just the reverse. But as Corey said, you're going to have to grab a lot more air out of your diaphragm, for those bugles.
And control that air. You don't want to just get that big deep breath of air and just blow it all out and be done, and then you can't get anything at the end of your bugle, which a lot of times you hear that. People hit the high note, and then all of a sudden it's just dead. There's nothing there to finish it. So you want to control that air. And I found that tongue pressure, I start off with low air pressure and low tongue pressure. Then I increase the tongue pressure, and then I really push with the air to hold that high note. That's what really holds. I'm high tongue pressure, and then the high air pressure comes to hold that high note, and then I drop them both off pretty rapidly.
And so would you, I'm asking this question probably knowing the answer. Would you recommend practicing initially with your bugle tube, or just working on controlling that pressure? Sans bugle tube, just working on that call first.
I feel like you use car salesman, but the tube actually makes bugling easier.
Okay.
There's a component of a tube that adds back pressure. It will help you learn to control the reed. It doesn't make if these tubes are just cut off on the end, they're all cupped for a reason.
So we have a cupped end there.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you start out with high velocity, let it open up into the chamber. There's things within the bugle tube that will assist you in running a diaphragm. Whereas if this was just chopped off, you have to basically keep up with putting as much air through that, and it doesn't necessarily help you with the reed and provide that back pressure. So adding, I feel like you use cars. You need to buy a tube. You can practice, but it's actually going to be more difficult to practice without a bugle tube.
Well, you can demonstrate. Just a diaphragm alone with a bugle. That's not a very, it sounds more like a wounded coyote call. And just simply doing that exact same thing with the tube. And it's crazy, like, I hit that high note. Jason held up 7 fingers.
I'm helping the judges out for in a month.
When I hit the high note without the tube, it fluttered like crazy. Like, it was hard to hold that consistent high note. Just by adding the tube, like Jason said, that back pressure helps you just hold that consistent high note, helps you hit it, and you don't have to just blow a whole bunch of air, and it really controls that air pressure.
That's interesting, because I asked the question thinking I knew I would have thought, okay, it's just adding more complexity. You want to focus on the steps first, but that's an interesting point where you're practicing that, and it actually physically affects how you hold the air and the note and everything.
I think I'd recommend somebody starting off just going through the mechanics of it without a tube, just getting the just going up that stair step and back down, then you can add the bugle tube.
Okay. So let's really quick go through those mechanics then and try it out with the bugle tube, and we'll get out of Brian's hair.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So it's just
low tongue pressure, low air pressure. Start it with that just low resonation. Now add some tongue pressure. Push some air pressure up there. Hold that high note and drop it off. Perfect.
Yeah.
Do that over and over. Yep. And then all you do is get that cadence. I put a little growl, just a little bit of grrr right there. And add that growl at the end. Growl at the beginning, growl at the end gives it that deep guttural sound that elk have, and put it together with the tube, and
here we go.
So you might try sliding that diaphragm up just a little bit in your mouth to hit the little bit higher note and get that tongue up into it a little more.
Yeah, you went up and grabbed that next note there a little bit. So
hit it there.
Okay.
Any other tips you have? One of the things I do is I actually open the corners of my mouth to help me hit that high note.
Yeah, that little bit of smile. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's one of those things you kind of forget you do, but you notice yourself
on
doing
video.
it.
I saw that. I'm like, why was I doing that?
Smiling. Yep.
See how it makes you hit a different note there? You got that higher note by opening the corners of your mouth up there.
Okay. Okay.
What other tips do you have for bugles?
I think that's about it on bugling. Yeah,
just keep working through. So trying to get that consistent, slow rise.
Yeah, and I think
through that break.
And I guess my tip would be is people pick up that call. What me and Corey just walked, or what Corey just basically just walked you through, was just getting that. It's a small portion of the bugle. There's so many more aspects to bugling. People get too hung up on I can't chuckle or grunt. Like for hunting wise, what you just did is what 90. We do all these fancy bugling, fancy grunting, some of these other sounds, but really just concentrate on what you just did there. And once you've got that mastered, then start exploring and trying to get some of these other things. But for hunting purposes, what you just did is 95% of the battle.
Yeah, you can call in elk with a simple cow call and a simple bugle. So.
And this is the crowd we're trying to reach, and so I'm not looking to teach people to win the elk calling championships.
Please
don't.
Hoping.
I'm just hoping this will help some folks who are starting out, and like myself, even I kind of knew some of these basics, but I already feel my cow calling improving significantly just at walking through this step by step, and those little pieces that if you watch a YouTube video you don't get.
Yeah.
And so I hope this hopefully helped out someone out there getting to watch this. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. Thank you to Brian for letting me steal his couch for a little bit.
That we are now getting officially kicked
off.
Yeah,
now we're getting kicked out, and rightly so. I'm hogging the things. But thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, y'all, that'll do it for episode 64 of Living Country in the City. Make sure y'all head on over to the show notes page at livingcountryinthecity.com/64 to check out links to everything we talked about in the episode, as well as links to all of Corey and Jason's socials. Also, I'm going to be posting up a link there to the YouTube video of this episode so y'all can get really the full effect. And finally, if you're a fan of Living Country in the City and you really enjoy the podcast, please head on over to my support page at livingcountryinthecity.com/support. Check out all the various options there. I'd really appreciate it. But in the meantime, keep it country, y'all.
Thank y'all for listening to Living Country in the City. Get show notes and check out the blog, product reviews, events, and more at livingcountryinthecity.com.